What's going on, guys, and welcome back to WrestleRant, where every single week I, Graham GSM Matthews, break down all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network. For the first time ever here on WrestleRant, I'll be breaking down a TNA pay-per-view here today, as seen on the Global Wrestling Network, TNA's version of the WWE Network, Victory Road 2004. A very different product from what we see today, that's for sure, but I'll be talking about that here today, as seen on the Global Wrestling Network. Opening the show, we had a 20-man gauntlet match for the X Division Cup, won by Hector Garza, I believe the father of Garza Jr., one of the wrestlers who currently competes for Impact Wrestling. This was a great match. It was 20 men, like I said. Every single man had their time to shine. There was no real story told, other than the fact that Kazarian entered at number 1, lasted until 20, until getting eliminated by Hector Garza. It was really a glorified spot fest, but this, honestly, that's what the X Division should be all about. I mean, some story mixed in as well, but by and large, the X Division has always been about spot fests. And that's exactly what this was. This was a great opener. A lot of points where the crowd was literally on their feet going fucking crazy after each of the spots that the X Division guys did. So a really, really fun match. Again, like I said, won by Hector Garza Jr. Real quick, the other competitors included Kazarian, as I mentioned. He lasted until the very end with Hector Garza Jr. before getting eliminated. We had Sanjay Dutt, Puma, L.A. Park, which is La Parker, pretty much. I don't know if they called him La Parker, but obviously they probably had some sort of legal issues with the name from WCW, whatever. And he came out swinging the chair to typical La Parker. Jarrett Clark, Miyamoto, I believe his name was. I might be fucking up the pronunciation of some of these names. Michael Shane, Nisawa, Mikey Batts. Real quick story. He used to play on my dad's baseball team, like in the last 10 years. They had not a dad's baseball team, but like an older guy's baseball team in the town my dad grew up in. And Mikey Batts was on the team. This is like 2009. This was when I first got into wrestling. I had no idea there was even life outside of WWE for the most part, but he had told my dad had told him I was a big wrestling fan, that he used to be a wrestler, and then I found out later on he did some work for WWE and TNA. It's funny that a guy named Mikey Batts would be playing baseball, given his last name. Never heard another word from him after that. I think he just kind of rode off into the sunset, stopped playing baseball. I never saw him again or heard from him again, but that was a pretty cool moment. Anyway, Alex Shelley, Matt Sydal, Sony Sakai, I believe that's how you pronounce that last name, Jason Cross, Shark Boy, Psychosis, D-Ray, 3000, Amazing Grad, Spanky, the Brian Kendrick, and Chris Sabin, who came in last. So again, very fun opener and exactly what the X Division would be all about. Although Hector Garza Jr., I believe in winning the X Division Cup, would earn himself a future title shot. From what I found out after doing some research after the show, he never got the X Division title match, so typical TNA. After that, we had an 8-man tag team match with Eric Watts, Johnny B. Bad, the former Mark Marrow, Ron Killings, obviously R-Truth, and Pat Kenny, who I thought might have been a producer or an agent for TNA, because for some reason the name sounds very, very familiar. They defeated the group of The Naturals, Kid Cash, and Dallas. Again, another very, very fun match. You had a lot of chaotic action in here, and with an 8-man tag team match, that's exactly what you want. Mark Marrow, despite being a couple years past this prime, still looked good in here. It was a fun match. I enjoyed it. Maybe not as chaotic as the opener, but still a very fun 8-man tag team match, despite nothing really being on the line. It was more of a match to kind of get everyone on the show, but the crowd enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, so I thought it was a good follow-up to that X Division opener. After that, we had minis action with Pirata Morgan and Masquerita Sagrada. I don't know if it's the same Sagrada, the same Masquerita Sagrada from Lucha Underground. It had the same uniform. The person had the same uniform. It was the same attire. I don't know if it was his dad, because I know there's been a few generations of Sagradas, because I remember seeing one in an old WWE pay-per-view from like the 80s or 90s at the Royal Rumble. You might know what I'm talking about. I'm not sure if it's that same Sagrada, but the guy could go. The guy's a very fun wrestler to watch, a lot like the Lucha Underground version. And mind you, this is 2004. Lucha Underground would not come into the picture for another 10 years. So again, I'm not sure if it's the same Sagrada or not, but he was a ton of fun to watch here. Morgan, on the other hand, not so much. The crowd did not like this match as much as the two other matches that opened the show. This really was not all that good. Sagrada was great. Morgan, not so much. He kind of limped through his performance. Not literally, but really was not up to par with Sagrada. And I know they kind of do this stuff for like comedy and whatever, which is exactly what happened here. And sometimes it can be very hit or miss. Here, I thought it was a miss. It wasn't a terrible match, but it really was not necessary, to say the least. After that, we had Scott Hall coming out saying that Kevin Nash was not in attendance. So, with the main event, you had Scott Hall endorsing the then NWA World Heavyweight Champion Jeff Jarrett, and you also had Kevin Nash supporting Jeff Hardy, his opponent for the night. He had announced that Kevin Nash was not there. With the way the announcers were talking about it, you figure Nash would show up. Because if he really did no-show, and I don't know if it was this pay-per-view or another show or some wrestler no-showed. I mean, that's happened a lot with TNA. And Samoa Joe called him out on his shit. I don't know if it was Scott Hall or Nash or someone else. It might have been Kevin Nash. I don't remember. It wasn't this show, though, because Kevin Nash did end up showing up, which I'll get to when we talk about the main event. But that's what that promo, the purpose that promo served there. For the NWA World Tag Team titles, we had the three Live Crew, taking on Team Canada, the then champions, the Three Live Crew being the challengers. BG James and Conan made up the Three Live Crew. Team Canada was consisting of Bobby Roode and Eric Young, obviously two guys that went on to bigger and better things, not only in TNA, but later on in NXT, and now the main roster for Bobby Roode. It's kind of surreal to look back and see them in their early years in TNA. It was a fine match. It wasn't that great. BG James, the former Brian James, the Road Dogg in WWE, the guy could never really wrestle to begin with. I always thought Billy Gunn was the better competitor of the two. But this really was not a great performance by him. By this point, he was just completely out of it. Conan was also the same way. Not too great here at all. Thankfully, Bobby Roode and Eric Young, being the consummate professionals that they are, carried this match, and they were really the ones to watch here. They gave the belts to BG James and Conan. I have no idea how long they held the titles for. It was a cool moment. The crowd enjoyed it, but it really was not that good of a match. I'm not sure why you would take the straps off the young guns, the young team, the up-and-coming tandem of Bobby Roode and Eric Young, just to give them to BG James and Conan for a quick pop or a quick nostalgia run, whatever it was. It really was not that great, but at least Roode and Young were the ones to watch here and really carry this match to being decent. After that, we had a pseudo Piper's Pit with Rowdy Roddy Piper coming out, hosting the Piper's Pit with Jimmy Superfly Snuka for the first time in over 20 years, I believe, unless they did it at another point later on in WWE or earlier on in WWE or elsewhere in the Indies. Pretty much Piper was here to talk about the X Division and say how great they are. You know, Snuka was the original X Division competitor. I never thought I would see the day where Piper was like endorsing the X Division, but I guess he was in TNA, albeit for a brief time. There's a lot of big names they brought into TNA to really endorse the brand, and none of them really worked, but it was surreal to see because I completely forgot that Piper and even Snuka were a part of TNA at one point, if only for a few appearances. But that was the sole purpose of this segment before Kid Cash, Matt Bentley, and Kazarian came out to crash the party and attack both men before Sanjay Dutt made the save and was endorsed by Piper on the way out with Piper, and then chasing off Kid Cash or whatever. So trying to incorporate the young guns with the new guys. So I like that, with the legends with the young guns, the new guys. I really like that because at least it gives them the rub. And it's not all about the legends from 20, 30 years ago. And that was really the sole purpose that it served. At least it helped give the rub and kind of get over those new heels and even the new babyface in Sanjay Dutt in the X Division. After that, we had Trinity being accompanied by the New York Connection. No idea who those guys were. Defeating Jacqueline, making her TNA debut. So it was a little weird for her to lose in her first ever match in TNA, but it really wasn't that big of an issue. Trinity cheated to win. I wouldn't have had Jacqueline lose, but it wasn't that big of a deal. Trinity cheated to win, using the New York Connection to pick up the victory, and the match was exactly what it needed to be. We have seen a lot of great women's matches, don't get me wrong, in TNA, but we've also had a lot of bad ones. WWE is the same way, so I'm not excluding them in this either, but back then, a lot of the matches they had with their knockouts were fucking atrocious. Thankfully, I didn't think this one was going to be any good anyway, so they kept it to about a minute, minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes long. Wasn't that long at all, very short and sweet, and an effective finish in getting over Trinity. After that, we had a three-way Monsters Ball match with Abyss, Raven, and Monty Brown. This was awesome. One of the better Monsters Ball matches that I've seen. And yeah, I mean, the stipulation is slightly silly. What the match is called and the weapons, and it could be a hardcore fucking train wreck. But the crowd loved it, and I thought this was really, really good. All three guys were awesome here. Raven, yeah, a bit past his prime, but he still held his own. He was right at home in this stipulation match. It probably would have been a worse off match without the Monsters Ball stipulation, to be quite honest with you. Abyss was just getting started in TNA, and Monty Brown was a star on the rise. He picked up the victory here as he should have, and it was a big win for him. But yeah, I thought this was very entertaining. I thought all three guys held their own here and put forth awesome performances. And Monty Brown, I completely forgot. Whenever I think of TNA guys who would go on to WWE and kind of get a push, albeit for a brief time before fizzling out and not really working out, I think of R-Truth obviously withstood the test of time, and he was in WWE before that anyway. But I think of Brandon Walker, Chris Harris, the Wildcat Chris Harris, the one half of the what's their tag team name? America's Most Wanted. I think of him. There's a few others that come to mind too. Caval. I completely forget about Monty Brown every single time. Later known as Marcus Corvan in WWE. But yeah, I mean, he was a big star in TNA in the first few years of TNA, and then he went on to WWE, fizzled out fairly quickly, got released, and we've really never heard from him again. I don't know if he ever went back to TNA. I don't think he did. And that was pretty much it for Brown, and I have not heard from him since. So, but this was a big win for him, and what I thought was a very entertaining match. And what I thought was the best match of the night came up next for the X Division Championship. We had AJ Styles gunning for the gold against P.D. Williams. I mean, when you have P.D. Williams and AJ Styles in the same match, is it really any surprise that the match was fucking awesome? These two guys worked wonderfully together. A lot of great counters to their finishers, to the Styles Clash, to the Canadian Destroyer, which up until recently had never been kicked out of in TNA, up until Eli Drake kicked out of it in a recent Global Championship match on Impact. I don't believe, according to what TNA has, according to what TNA had said, no one has ever kicked out of it in TNA, which is really interesting. But yeah, this was an awesome match, an absolutely phenomenal performance from both guys. The counters were great, the chemistry was there. You had Scott D'Amore, who is the captain of Team Canada, and I mean, you can argue that he kind of took away from the match a little bit. I didn't think so. I thought he kind of added to it, if anything, with his mannerisms, and he was kept limited at ringside anyway, so it really wasn't that big of a deal that he was there. The focus was really all on the action and all on AJ Styles and P.D. Williams, so surprise, surprise that a match with P.D. Williams and AJ Styles was the match of the night. And I thought the finish was great, too. The Canadian Destroyer, which Williams had tried oh so desperately to hit the entire match, he hit it out of nowhere on AJ right off the top rope, and it looked fucking awesome. So that was really, really cool. And Williams retained his X Division Championship in the process. So all around, this was a phenomenal match, and like I said, the best of the night. And from there, the show just went off the fucking rails, but this really should have been the end of the show, but we'll continue nonetheless. I was going to say for the tag titles, it was not for the tag titles. That was the match earlier on with Real Life Crew and Team Canada. We had America's Most Wanted versus Triple X, which was Eliax, I don't know how you pronounce his name. Skipper, whatever, with Christopher Daniels, and then America's Most Wanted with James Storm and Chris Harris, the aforementioned Wildcat, the aforementioned Brandon Walker in WWE's ECW brand. This was not that good of a match. I was really looking forward to this because I enjoy America's Most Wanted. I love Christopher Daniels, and I've heard good things about Skipper in the past, in TNA's early years, but the guy sucked here. I don't know what happened. This was an elimination last team standing match, so it was kind of a weird stipulation to begin with, but with a blood feud and with great athletes involved, you would think this would be a match of the night candidate, but it really wasn't. It really wasn't that good of a match. This was a train wreck, but not in a good way, as I mentioned earlier. Skipper was really, I don't know. I mean, everyone else held up their own, but Skipper was just really off here. The finish fucked everything up. So Harris hit his finisher on Skipper on top of a chair. Then Skipper kicked out. And I don't think he was supposed to because the ref was confused, Harris was confused, I was confused. Then the bell rang. The whole thing was fucked up. So I don't know if that was intentional or if it was a botch. But it came off very awkwardly and ended the match, which was not that good to begin with, on a very awkward note and a very confusing note. On the bright side, right afterwards, we had Dusty Rhodes being nominated as the Director of Authority of TNA over Vince Russo. Thank God. Immediately afterwards, and apparently an online poll voted on by the fans. So Dusty Rhodes was the new authority figure in TNA. So going back to what I was saying before, he would make a rematch between the two teams at the next pay-per-view, the Turning Point pay-per-view in December, between those teams in a 6 sides of steel match for the pay-per-view. So hopefully that match is better, because that really was not that good. But yeah, speaking of Dusty Rhodes, the entire night they would run vignettes, like campaigns almost, campaign video packages for why you should vote for Dusty Rhodes. He's gonna make it a better TNA. Vince Russo, God forbid, if anything, made it a worse TNA. But yeah, I'm glad Dusty Rhodes got the vote over Vince Russo. I'm not sure how long it lasted, but having an established legend like Dusty Rhodes as your as your head honcho in the company speaks volumes to what they're going for, and I mean that in a good way, because Dusty Rhodes is a credible legend. So I thought that was good. After that, we had our main event for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Jeff Jarrett defending the gold against Jeff Hardy. A lot of cool high spots, a lot of cool moments. Overall, though, not that great of a match at all. I mean, the fact that Jarrett was involved at all is not surprising, because I knew that he was a focal point, unfortunately, of the early years of TNA, especially in the world title scene. But this was really not that good. Even Jeff Hardy was not at his best here. I don't know what was going on, but he did not put forth the effort I thought he would. Again, there were some cool spots with the ladders, but overall, this was not that good of a match in terms of the flow and the pacing. It was just really, really weird. Scott Hall still showed up to support Jeff Jarrett, although Kevin Nash was not there. Scott Hall looked like shit here. He was taking a lot more bumps than I thought he would. At one point, he had the ladder crash on top of him, so that kind of surprised me. But he looked like shit here, despite the fact he was taking more bumps than I thought he would. In the end, Kevin Nash came out to help Jeff Hardy, or so he thought. In the end, he would turn on Hardy and help Jarrett win. A typical TNA finish. That is so TNA of TNA, to do a finish like that in the main event of their first real pay-per-view. I know they had other pay-per-views when they first started the company, to the weekly pay-per-views or whatever, but this was their first real pay-per-view in 2004, and they ended on such an awful note. More stuff would happen afterwards, which we'll talk about in a second, but the fact they would put, Jarrett over Hardy, and Hardy was the up-and-coming star at that point after being let go from WWE, was a pretty big single star in TNA. They had Jarrett go over him. Jeff would not get his win back. He would not win the championship until he would come back to the company many years down the road. But this was really, on the whole, not that good. I think Trainwreck might be the best way to describe it, because there were some cool moments, like I said, with the ladders, and with Jeff Hardy, that's to be expected. With Jeff Jarrett being involved, that really killed my interest from the get-go, but it really was not that good of a match, especially the finish, with Kevin Nash costing Hardy the victory. So they would beat up all the babyfaces, including Jeff Hardy, AJ Styles, who came out, Ron Killings, and BG James. They beat the shit out of all those guys. And in the end, the big debut, I think it was his debut, unless he appeared prior to this point, but I don't think he did. The grand arrival in TNA of Macho Man Randy Savage. They played music similar to Pomp and Circumstance, his theme music from WWE, so you kind of figured it was him when he was coming out. The commentators treated it like a big deal, and they were at the end. He didn't really do anything. He just came out to, stop the heels from attacking the baby faces. Why they just didn't continue attacking the faces, I have no idea. Why they were so distracted. But Macho Man came out, and the commentators were plugging the upcoming episodes of Impact on this and that, and also the next pay-per-view. So it was a cool ending to get people talking about TNA, and another reason for them to watch the next pay-per-view. But the main event just was not that good. Overall, though, I will give the show a thumbs up. Some of the later matches were not that great, but that undercard was fucking awesome. That opener was great. The 8-man tag team match was a lot of fun. Like I said, the X Division title match was fucking awesome too, as well as the Monsters Ball match. That was remarkable. So the good outweighs the bad here, especially for historical significance. You got a lot of people that would go on to become big stars in TNA and later in other companies, from AJ and Petey Williams, Abyss. You had Kazarian, the Motor City Machine Guns, Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley, and many others. So it was a historically significant show, but it really would set the tone, unfortunately, for future main events and Impact, not only for those first few years, but also dating back to even a couple of years ago, when they would always end with the fucking ref bumps and the interference and all this other shit in their main event, which other companies do, but no one did it as often as TNA would in those first few years, especially later on as well. But overall, though, I would say check it out. You could sign up for the Global Wrestling Network. I think it's only $10. I know you could use it for free, but I don't think you can really watch many pay-per-views. So if you got to watch the pay-per-view, you have to pay $9.99, the same price, or $7.99, I think it is. $9.99 is the WWE Network, but I think it's worth it. You get a lot of great content, not only the old pay-per-views and pretty much every TNA pay-per-view ever, which is worth it, but you get old episodes of Impact, documentaries, British Boot Camp, a lot of other stuff. So I think it's worth the money paid for, especially if it's only $8. If only to not only just check out this pay-per-view, but other pay-per-views available on the service. So I'll be talking about another TNA pay-per-view at some point in January. This is our final edition of WrestleRant in 2017, so thank you guys for all your support of the show all year round. We recently surpassed some sort of milestone. I know we just closed out, or we're closing in on 1,500 subscribers here in the channel, which is fucking huge. But we are closing in on 500 episodes this upcoming summer, in the summer of 2018, so I look forward to that. But WrestleRant at this point has now been around for over 6 years, and it will continue as long as I have stuff to talk about, and I think we have plenty to talk about between WCW, ECW, WWE, and TNA pay-per-view. So it's going to be a long time before I wrap up this show, I'll tell you that much right now. But speaking of which, next week, I will be talking about in the premiere edition of WrestleRant in the new year, in the new year, I will be reviewing Starrcade 1984 as seen on the WWE Network, so stay tuned for that next Tuesday. Beyond that, guys, just have a great rest of your holiday season. I know Christmas was yesterday as this goes up, so I hope you guys had an awesome Christmas. And I hope you guys have a very happy New Year. So that being said, folks, I'm Graham Giason Matthews, and I'll catch your ass in the new year.